So amid the doom and gloom and the dropping prices and all the bad news talk, there is some bright spots out there. So for those of you out there shopping around for properties, bear in mind that whenever we talk about the marketplace, we categorise and generalise probably too much. And when you drill into it, there's always areas that are going well, above average, and there's always areas that, of course, the opposite, going badly, really badly. So just make sure you're informed and know what is happening. And look for those signs, like the cafes that are vibrant and those sort of areas where things are still really happening. Now today, it is summer and it's time to talk about bushfires. We do this every year, and we're honoured to have the CFS State Coordinator, Mr. Brenton Eden, in the studio. Brenton.
Thank you, Anthony, for having me.
Now, you love fires, don't you? You spend all of your time training people, and just give us some background on Brenton Eden and what you do.
30 odd years in the fire service, most as a volunteer. Last 12 years as a career staff member, managing the training for 15,000 volunteers. And then, as your introduction says, I'm a state coordinator during the fire season for bushfires.
Now, Brenton, some really important tips this time of the year. I live in the hills. I've got a property in Kaipo, as you know, right in the middle of the really high risk area. What are the things that we should be doing as property owners in these locations right now?
Well, look, I think the take-home message right now is you should already be doing your bushfire preparation. And I think there's a really good quote from one of our volunteers, 40 years as a firefighter, who was impacted on the fires of 2 years ago. And he stated that 40 years of training really prepared him for what he was about to face, except on the day when the fire occurred, he hadn't put in anywhere near enough work prior to the event. So the take-home message is, look around your property. Your property is full of flammable fuels that will burn.
Sure is.
You're the owner of the fuels. You need to have done something about it, and very soon. We've already seen millions of hectares this year burnt in South Australia, and probably the audience of this program, very much in the Adelaide Hills, would not be aware of the 3 to 4 million hectares that are burnt in the far north already. And we've had significant fires in the Adelaide Hills and on the west coast, and we're very early into the season.
Brent, are you expecting this to be a pretty full-on year because of the amount of rain that we've had?
Look, we are. There's a bit of cry wolf. The fire service every year, and probably for the last 30 years, has said this year's the worst fire season we're ever going to face. I think everyone who drives through the Adelaide Hills now will know the amount of grass that's browning off rapidly. It's tall grass, it's dry, it's very flammable, and I guess 10 to 20 years ago, lightning would have caused that to catch on fire, or perhaps some work being undertaken. Now it's unpredictable. It's the arsonist out there, it could be your neighbour, it's someone driving through who may well light that fire up, and you just need to be prepared now for the consequences. Okay,
so let's just run through the key things. The first thing you look for is flammable material.
Absolutely. Think of everything on your property as fuel. Okay. And should it be there at this time of the year? If it's vineyards, obviously. If it's grass, have you cut it, slashed it, removed it? If it's stacks of firewood, is it in the right place? Is it next to a shed? The real risk is the embers that are going to either land in the flammable fuels, land on your front doormat. You know, how many people have got a Koya doormat sitting on the front door, which is a nice little square metre of flammable fuel to light up your door. So you need to walk around that property, walk around your sheds, and make sure that you've done the prevention that you think will reduce the fuel. If you can't do that, you've got to decide in your bushfire action plan not to be there.
Right. Now we've got heritage scrub that comes right up to one side of one of our building, one side of the building.
Yep.
We're not allowed to burn off or do anything in there, not even meant to remove any timber, old timber, anything. What's your recommendation in that kind of environment?
Look, some of the legislation has changed recently, and even in your case, it would be worth touching base with local council. You are allowed to clear now within 20 metres of your house and a significant building. So if that's a significant shed, then an application through council may see that you can clear some of that vegetation. If you can't, then you've just got to make sure that if that vegetation catches on fire, what can you do about it? Now I know when we were here last, you talked about having hose reels and all the protective equipment.
Got my fire extinguishers here.
Perhaps that won't really help out in
a... Be good in a bushfire?
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
It may help if your car's on fire.
Right.
But you know, all that preparation and planning is fine if you yourself are going to be there to turn the hose on and use it in what will be a very frightening situation. And that's another take-home message is a bushfire in the Adelaide Hills is a frightening scenario. It will frighten trained firefighters. So the average household who thinks that they will become a part-time firefighter on that day and combat that fire have really got to put themselves in the position of someone who might have 10, 15, 20 years of firefighting experience and just determine whether they're ready to handle it. And if they're not, they shouldn't be there.
What about, we built a big cellar into the side of the hill, concrete sides underground, a brick house on top according to the new specs, you know, with the fire risk, so, you know, all the gear, and a 330 mil concrete slab. Is it safe for us to go into our cellar, shut the door at the front to keep the embers out, got another set of doors, or would we be better to just get out of there?
That's a question I can't answer. So many people in the Victorian fires did not get from their back door to their shelter. Very, very sad instances of the family sheltering the house and then saying, this is too hot, this is too dangerous, we will go to our bushfire shelter. And they didn't make the distance. And it may have only been 10 metres, but they didn't make the distance. They died between their back door and their shelter. So it's again, your bushfire action plan says, Anthony, will you be in that bunker in the morning waiting for that fire to come, or will you not be in the area? The safest place to be is not in the area. And one of our current research projects reveals some really disturbing trends that when we broadcast a bad day, everyone will understand that it's a bad day, but it's not a bad day for them.
Right.
It's a bad day for someone else.
Okay.
And the message isn't getting through. So not knowing where your bunker is, not knowing where your house is, it's a question of, is that distance between your house and your bunker safe? And I'm sure your bunker would be very safe once you're inside it. Okay,
now we're going to come back in a minute later in the show, and I'd like to go through these flyers from the CFS. But before we do that, let's have a look at a bit of property, and we'll come back in a minute, Brendan.
Thank you.
So let's go and have a look at some sold properties, which is the exciting part of the show for us, of course, and that's going, going, gone.